Hello, my dear 1000 PS viewers. You didn't even see me behind this massive fairing and this huge tank, right? While I was hiding, a provocative question popped into my mind. Is this BMW's new sporty beast? Well, I'll answer this and other questions you may never have thought of during this test. So, see you after the intro. Well, sporty beast might be a bit exaggerated, but I must be honest. Today is the first time I've seen this bike in person. I stood behind it, examined it thoroughly, and of course, I also sat on it. This massive fairing, this structure, this handlebar, it's so wide and so bulky that I really thought this is a true beast on wheels. And the tank, in that sense, fits well with the bike. But, okay, let's talk briefly about the aesthetics, which for me is always an important topic, though everyone can decide for themselves whether they like it or not. In the photos, I thought it was incredible how this part gives off that sense of angular mess, which is exactly what BMW wanted, because the clientele of the Adventure and the standard GS are completely different. Those who choose the Adventure are long-distance travelers who value comfort more, and I'll talk about that later. But they definitely wanted the design to be completely different. I thought they might do something similar to what they did with the F900 GS and the Adventure, where the regular F900 became much more modern and sporty, and the Adventure kept a more rugged style. I expected something similar for the 1300 GS Adventure, something like what they did with the 1250 GS, very angular and aggressive. But in reality, it's completely different from all the others, different from its predecessor, and also much more elegant compared to the standard 1300 GS. Now, let's move on to the other part of the name I wanted to give it here. Sporty beast. Is it sporty? Well, as far as the engine is concerned, yes, it is. We have the engine of the standard 1300 GS with its 145 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. But the most important thing is its 149 Newton meters of torque at 6,500 RPM. It pushes brutally, and it does so on both the standard 1300 GS and the Adventure. In this case, we're talking about the heavy bike with BMW stating it weighs 269 kilograms ready to ride, and that's with everything this bike comes with. One might think, something this heavy can't be sporty. But you already know that in BMW's catalog there are many heavy bikes that surprisingly are very agile and sporty to ride. And I'll just mention the K1600s, which are beasts, and in terms of power and torque, they're not far off. So yes, it's possible to ride it in a sporty way thanks to the engine. Now let's move on to handling. Here's more of the same. The 1300cc Boxer engine creates such a low and pleasant center of gravity in the bike that it allows it to move very quickly and smoothly through corners. I had no problems on the road. Perhaps part of that is due to the Metzeler Karoo 4 tires we have mounted, which also allowed us to handle off-road paths, gravel and slightly more difficult terrains. I wouldn't say they were difficult terrains, but yes, with relatively large stones, etc. And even so, the bike performed very well. The tire makes it easier for the bike to enter curves on the road more smoothly, and the stability is excellent. In short, everything works perfectly. Also, very important when talking about comfort and sportiness is the ASA, the automatic shift assistant. I had already had the opportunity to try this system on the standard GS a few weeks ago, and at that time I thought, well, this system doesn't let you down, because it always finds the right shifting point. It does it very intelligently, just as you would do yourself. Each of the available driving modes also adjusts the shift points, and it's clear that BMW has been testing this system thoroughly. At that time, I also noticed that the shift pedal, that almost synthetic pressure point, didn't convince me much. I like to have a clearer response, and when starting with the adventure, I felt the same, although I was able to get used to it little by little. Apart from that, on the road, most of the time I used the automatic function, because this R1300 GS adventure shifts exactly when I would. The road mode was the one that worked best for me. I also liked the dynamic mode a lot. One thing that might be important to mention is that with the ASA system you can switch to manual mode and shift as you please. The only difference being that if you stop on the side in 6th gear, the bike will automatically shift to 1st. Something really useful because, as you know, there's no clutch lever. This system also manages the throttle blip between gears extremely precisely. Talking to a BMW technician, they told me they wanted to find a middle ground for the shift lever, giving it some resistance so you'd feel like the gear is engaging mechanically. But the truth is there are people for everything, and in this case it's so smooth that you could shift with your little finger without any problems. For some it might be too smooth, but it's something done to enhance comfort. The ASA is only available in a package that costs around 1,500 euros in Germany, but the system itself costs between 750 and 900 euros, depending on the country. And as I mentioned, considering that the bike costs around 22,500 euros in Germany, this extra cost could still be reasonable for those interested in this model. Now let's talk about ergonomics. As you can imagine, it offers excellent wind protection and the windshield can be adjusted electronically. In colder seasons this is great, but when it's as hot as it is here, it can be too much. But well, in any case, the wind protection is fantastic. Regarding the seat, it's adjustable to two heights, 870 and 890 millimeters, which seems quite high to me. BMW also offers, upon request, an adaptive height adjustment system for the bike, which can be ordered from the factory if you pay for it. This system allows the bike to lower to 840 millimeters when you drop below 25 kilometers per hour. There's also a comfort adaptive height adjustment system, which allows the bike to drop even further by an additional 20 millimeters, reaching 820 millimeters. Additionally, there's a lower seat that reduces another 20 millimeters. So theoretically, you could go down to 800 millimeters. When the bike returns to 50 kilometers per hour, the suspension adjusts again. Something to appreciate to make it accessible to as many customers as possible. Up front, we have 190 millimeters of travel and 200 millimeters at the rear. Everything is perfectly balanced. Compared to the standard 1300 GS, the rear frame has been lengthened to provide more space and comfort for the passenger. So more comfort for both. This also affects its off-road performance. As I said earlier, on gravel paths with relatively large stones where you need to ride standing up, the adventure performs precisely. You'd think that with such a big bike it might be a problem, but the weight is very well balanced. I never felt like I was losing control of the bike or lacking grip. And if it happens that you have a small accident where the bike ends up on the ground, you have these crash bars where the bike rests, and it's surprisingly easy to lift it up since it doesn't reach an awkward angle that would require you to be a weightlifter. So everything has its pros and cons. And in this case, the Boxer engine has many advantages on normal terrain or on the road. If the terrain becomes more complicated, like very narrow trails, those cylinders could get in the way a bit. But the question is whether you really want to do extreme off-roading with such a big bike. Here in Spain, on roads with lots of curves, paved, and also on some roads in bad condition, I had a lot of fun. Even on roads full of potholes, the bike absorbed everything. The chassis is clearly comfort-oriented as they want it, and in that sense, it works extremely well. Today we covered many kilometers, about 400 kilometers in total, which is not bad at all for a day of testing, considering we were also recording videos and taking photos and all that. In fact, we could have done another 200 kilometers without having to stop for fuel, thanks to its 30-liter tank. And yes, for those looking for a big bike with a 30-liter tank, I highly recommend it. There aren't many in this category, and those that compete with it may offer more power, but with the incredible torque that the R1300 GS Adventure delivers, this bike is definitely at the top of its class and manages to convince. Personally, it convinced me. All in all, I had a great time. Thanks for being with us. I hope you're already subscribed to our YouTube channel. If for some incomprehensible reason you're not, subscribe now so you don't miss any of the 2025 updates.